From the studios of KHTS in beautiful downtown Newhall, California, it's time once again for Families in Action with your host, Cary Quashen. Families in Action is brought to you by Action Family Counseling, drug and alcohol counseling for teens and adults, and by the Action Family Foundation, and by KHTS AM 1220, your hometown station. And now, here's the man with the most. Here's your host, Cary Quashen.
You know what's really cool? I was thinking that. I mean, we've been here almost 13 years. Able to kind of give a message out that is really a helpful kind of deal. Isn't that cool?
Very cool.
It is, very.
Okay. And you know what? Let's do what we're gonna. We have a few things to do before we do what Ann's gonna do. But let's introduce Ann Front first. Ann Front is a licensed therapist. She's over at Henry Mayo. And what exactly do you do before we go on? I mean, I know, but I want you to tell everybody.
Well, thank you for having me. I work with the palliative
Well,
care.
did you pay us to be here? I'm just
I
playing.
should have.
No, we love when you're here.
I work for the palliative care department, which is a department that started about 4 years ago in the hospital, just as an added layer of support to patients and families going through a life-limiting illness.
Right.
And it's National Palliative Care Month. Actually, it's
Yeah.
hospice and
Hospice
palliative.
and palliative care.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to say, every time I go on Facebook or I put the news on and there was a special about heroin in some other state, I mean, a guy that I know, his mother passed away this weekend from a heroin and opiate overdose. And we just did, as you were talking when I walked in, the hospital just put on a huge pain management kind of deal and accidental addiction kind of deal. And the reason I want to bring that up is because it disgusts me. I don't even want to watch the news. I don't even want to read my Facebook page because I'm hooked into all those drug things out there. And every time I put on something, somebody's dead. We had, kids coming to the ER, 20 years old, overdoses. It's really sickening. 43,000 people die a year from drug overdose. And you know what's really scary? It's not heroin. Out of the 43,000 people that die, 8,000 is heroin. That means 30-something thousand people are dying from what? Pills. So I'm really it's disgusting, and I've been screaming for the last 5 or 6 years to anyone that would listen, hey, the opiate addiction, the epidemic that we're having is going to be worse than it ever was in the 70s, and everybody said, you're crazy. Well, guess what? It's worse, and the reason why it's worse is because we have stronger, better drugs today. Mm-hmm. So people are getting physically addicted to them, and then we build up tolerances. And the reason I'm saying this is I was talking to someone that overdosed last week, and it's the same thing always. What happened? Well, I was sober. Oh, there you go. I was sober for a while. After 4 months, I decided to get high, and before I know it, I was overdosed. Because what happens is we build a tolerance when we're using every day. When we stay clean, our tolerance goes away. It goes down. Exactly. When we start using, our mind needs more drugs for us to feel that good that we're looking for. Our bodies can't handle it. So a lot of these people that are dying are people that have been clean for a little bit of time and now picked up again, and on their relapse, they're dying. And I don't really believe in preventative care. I mean, preventative care I believe in, but what is the word I'm looking for? Whatever it is. But to kind of tell people how to use, I don't want to do that. But I am going to say, if you haven't used and you start using it again, you better be careful.
Well, it's also the doctor's first line of defense sometimes that you come in for a symptom, so here's some pain management.
Right.
Here's some pain drugs to take that, and if you have a history of addiction, then it's kind of a slippery slope to get right back into that.
Well, I think doctors, and I believe that almost all doctors really have patients' concerns first priority. And they want to make sure that you're not hurting. But there's a problem with that because you can't see pain. Mm-hmm. So if I'm telling you, doc, oh, my back, I can't sleep, I can't move, it's killing me, what are you going to do? So you prescribe something. But doctors, you can't hear me? Now you can? Okay. Doctors, I guess I have to be careful here. Doctors really need to get in tune with the patients that they're treating. And look at past history. of substance abuse and stuff like that, and talk to the patient, because we're turning away, we're turning out so many addictive people these days because of the medications. And also, I mean, for the docs listening, when somebody loses their prescription 3 times and the dog ate it and it was washed in the laundry, there's something wrong. Drug addicts are very manipulative, and they're going to do whatever they can to get what they need. So I'm really disgusted, because like I said, it's somebody I know, mother passed away, and then there's a couple more people from yesterday, today, that I'm aware of that lost their lives. We have a kid that was overdosed, 20 years old. I mean, it's just like, it's getting me sick.
Well, Cary, here's an action file that just comes right in on the heels of what you were saying. California doctor convicted of murder charges in overdosing patients. And this is a Roland Heights doctor.
He said what? Say that again.
California doctor convicted of murder charges in overdose of patients. This is a Roland Heights doctor, Dr. Lisa Singh, who prosecutors say is the first doctor convicted of murder in the United States for recklessly prescribing drugs to patients, was accused of ignoring red flags about her prescribing habits, including the overdose of a patient in her clinic and 9 phone calls in less than 3 years from authorities informing her that patients had died with drugs in their system. And the the deputy district attorney is saying this message, this case, sins, you can't hide behind a white lab coat and commit murder or commit crimes. She wrote them a prescription for everything they were addicted to.
You know, I was talking to Detective Velick and Sergeant Bob Wattsmith the other day, and they actually arrested and had somebody convicted of some kind of murder. I don't know, it wasn't first degree or second degree, but it could have been manslaughter or whatever, for dealing drugs to somebody that had died. So that's another first. So they're really getting on top of that. And hey, if you're dealing drugs, if you're a person off the streets, or if you're a doctor or whatever it is, they're going to get you. I mean, there's too many people dying right now, and everybody's paying attention.
Well, here's another action file, Cary, and this one shows authorities cracking down here in Southern California. Listen to this. Authorities said nearly 500 people were arrested over the weekend at 2 electronic music festivals in Southern California that drew tens of thousands of people. Police in Pomona said 310 people were arrested during the 2-day festival in Pomona. In San Bernardino, police arrested some 180 people during the 2-day these are raves, by the way. Yeah.
You ever been to one of those?
Me? Do I look like a guy that would go to one of those?
I actually went with one. I went there with Crescenta Valley newspaper with cameras. So we went to a rave. There's hundreds and hundreds of people, and everything was. I was very surprised at first. I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." The kids were having a great time, except for there was some that was clearly a little bit high, and they were leaning on these speakers that were bigger than this room, and you know that they're going to have problems later in life with their ears. But about 12 or 1 in the morning, it changed a little bit dramatically. More people were getting loaded. You could see people drinking stuff. Drugs were around. People were having sex. People were over. I mean, it was wild.
Well, these were huge. The
Wow.
Pomona event drew an estimated 20,000 people Saturday.
Right.
The San Bernardino Festival attracted nearly 90,000 people over a 2-day period.
And these
Wow,
are
wow.
youngsters.
Yeah, most of them are. And most of the arrest was for illegal drug possession, trespassing, or public intoxication, and 100 people for having fake identification.
100 people for fake IDs.
We have one more action item, Cary, and a Florida man was placed in a coma after his e-cigarette exploded.
You know what? I hate to say this. I hate to admit this. I'm going to admit it. My daughter has a vape. And you know what she did? She called me yesterday and she says, "Dad, I got to buy a new vape." I said, "Why?" "Mine blew up."
Well, listen to this.
Mine blew up.
This isn't
Wow.
any small thing. This guy is 21 years old. His sister found him lying on the floor with his face covered in soot and 3rd-degree burns. He actually ended up with severe burns to his face, chest, hands, and lungs. He turned on, the paramedics figured it out, he turned on his e-cigarette. It exploded. It shot the mouthpiece down his throat, and it exploded again in his throat.
This is not nothing.
So
wait.
here
This is not nothing that we don't hear quite frequently lately.
Right. Well, I was just going to say, here in Southern California, a man, all he did was put the battery in the e-cigarette.
That's right.
It exploded and sent bits of metal
Into the wall.
across the room and lodged into the wall.
Yeah.
In other words, it was like a grenade went off.
Wow.
He's lucky he lived.
These things are, very dangerous. That's not even talking about, we don't even know how dangerous it really is to your bodies because it's so new. All the studies aren't out there, but I do know this. Anything that you inhale and you put into your lungs, it can't be good. It can't be. And what's really scary, if we're going to talk about vaping and e-cigarettes just for a minute, I believe that they were really started to help people stop smoking. Problem is more and more people now, young people, are vaping that would never have smoked. So more people are now hooked on that than would have been hooked on cigarettes or tobacco. So it's kind of, I don't even know how to say it. It's backfiring.
And plus, they can put illegal substances in the...
They can, and nowadays they're sophisticated, these devices, so you can smoke anything you want in there. You can smoke weed, you can smoke heroin, you can put crystal meth. So you really never know what's going on. So it's very dangerous, and parents need to be extremely aware of what's going on with their children.
Yeah. Wow. Isn't that amazing? I mean, we're talking about exploding devices, and then we're talking about the problem with what you're putting in your lung from these devices. Not good all the way around.
No.
Cary, I mentioned it earlier, but November is National Hospice and Palliative Care Month.
Something we all don't want to think about. You're in a spot where people don't want to hear those words.
That's very true. It's hard when you get that initial diagnosis, and I think we still look back to before all these medical treatments that it's hearing the words I have cancer or I have a serious illness feels like that's the end and there's no other options. And over time, we've developed a medicine called palliative medicine, which really addresses symptom management through any stage of an illness because there are a lot more treatment options. And having a diagnosis of cancer or kidney disease or other life-limiting illnesses, they're life-limiting, but that could mean that somebody would be alive for years just with extended symptoms that they have to keep track of and be on top of. Yeah.
And Cary, and also we introduced you earlier in the show, but we really need to reintroduce you again because you are actually, well, I'll let you, you're Ann Front, and you're
That's
an
who she is.
LMFT.
I'm Ann Front.
LMFT. What does that stand for?
A licensed marriage and family therapist.
And what exactly do you do with a palliative care?
Well, what we do, I work inpatient in the hospital, but there's a lot of services growing in the community for palliative care. And basically, it's a small support team that is just an added level of support because, as you can imagine, any diagnosis of a serious or chronic illness is going to impact a person's life with work, social, physical. And so it's just an added support to help navigate the health system, help looking at goals and advanced healthcare planning for the maximum quality of life. So we look at a holistic approach when you're talking about heroin and pain management and things, how that can easily get into an addiction. With palliative care and hospice, we look at more of a holistic way of treating so that people aren't necessarily reliant on just pain management or focused on pharmacology or the medical. So with palliative care, there's often spiritual support, psychological support, along with the medical intervention.
And you're over at Henry Mayo Newhall Hospital. We need to mention that.
We started a program about 4 years ago. It started with just a nurse, and we were fortunate to get a large grant to build a whole program. So we have nurse, physician, social work, myself, and then a chaplain. So we go in as a team and provide that extra layer of support.
And what is it that a doctor does differently with palliative care?
The doctor looks at the whole picture. A lot of times you have a kidney specialist that comes in and says, your kidneys look amazing. And then the oncologist says, well, you've got cancer, you could live a few years, or you need these types of treatment. And then the lung doctor says, things look pretty bad. So the families are hearing all different things, and the patients don't know what to do or who to understand. So the palliative medicine doctor can go in and take all the reports and look at a whole treatment plan. And again, looking at what's important to the patient, because what I would want for my life might be very different from somebody else. So if we clarify what is quality of life and what's important, then we can have a good treatment plan that's patient and family centered.
So you actually have a whole team of people helping that patient, and well, not just the patient. Patient's obviously the identified person, but it sounds like you include the whole family, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think a lot of times patients will come in and say, I have this disease, but really what we see is the whole family has it.
Right.
The families become the caregivers, or there's changes in the family's life because of the patient's illness. So if we treat it as a whole system, it can alleviate a lot of that pain and suffering that a person might be going through. And when we look at pain, we look at physical pain, psychological pain, existential pain, that, it's, you have the physical pain, but if you're anxious or depressed about it,
Right.
or bringing up old grief issues, then all of that is this enormous amount of pain that medications aren't going to treat.
Yeah, and we know, pain, there are pain management. There is ways to deal with pain.
There's a lot of ways,
yes.
non-pharmacological ways.
Right, but that's physical. Emotional pain can even be worse.
Yeah.
So
I run a cancer support group, and what I find is people will come in and say, I'm in so much pain, and after an hour of talking, they say, I feel so much better. And we didn't give out one pill,
Right.
but it's just not feeling that isolation, feeling like you're part of something, other people are going through it, and just having that connection, I think, goes a long way.
absolutely.
Most people probably are aware of, to some degree, probably not a lot, but to some degree, about hospice care, which means end of life. Most people are thinking.
Well,
in terms
tell
of
us what
end
is
of life.
exactly that means.
Yeah. So what?
Tell
Yeah.
us.
What are we looking
Yeah.
at here? Because I know that, and you know that this can go on for a lot longer than just a few days. But
Right. Yeah, palliative care is sort of what I see as a large umbrella from the initial diagnosis all the way through end of life. A lot of people associate palliative care as hospice, but hospice is really part of palliative care in the end stage. So Medicare sort of defines it for all the insurances and I guess just the community, where you would initiate hospice about the last 6 months of a person's life, if that's what they want. And basically, hospice means you're foregoing curative treatment. You're saying, my goal is to be at home and be comfortable, use the days that I have left or months to be with my family, to be doing the things I love, rather than coming in and out of the hospital or doing care that might not
right.
it's not going to cure, so how much do you want to be poked and prodded?
It might just prolong whatever
It
pain.
prolongs your
right.
suffering. So it's a
Exactly.
different focus, and sometimes people start, when they only have a few days left of their life, which I feel is kind of a poor use of the benefit, because it's such a full and supportive benefit that can relieve that suffering for, like I said, 6 months, or oftentimes people will renew the benefit when they stop all those quote unquote curative care medicines and things. They actually could live longer or do better. We had one patient that went off all the heart medication, all the cancer medications, and she lived an entire year, where the doctor had said without doing any treatments, you have weeks to months to live. So
right.
reducing that stress and fears about what's going on, not to mention the medications battling with each other, you can actually extend and have a better quality of life.
So
go ahead.
Go-
Cary.
no, go on,
You go ahead. You get involved with not only the patient but also the families as
Correct.
a therapist. So how do you take that? How far do you take that?
Well, what I tried to do is, because of HIPAA regulations where we have confidentiality, we can't break confidentiality of a patient. And sometimes patients don't want to seek out or get the support from the family, especially, ones with older kids. They say, I don't want to bother them.
sometimes they don't even want their families to know they're sick.
Yeah, exactly. And so then the families aren't prepared when you're in the end stage. Why didn't anybody tell me this? Or I could have spent all those months with my family member, rather than being on with my work and my kids and just thinking dad's okay. So what we try to do is get involved earlier in the diagnosis so that we can start saying what is important to you, what can we do to alleviate that suffering and to gain the support of family and friends. And that can take a little while, but the ultimate goal is to involve those people so that they can have that time and say what they want to say.
We need to do this several times during the show for people out there. But is there a phone number that anybody can call if they need more information?
Yeah, for my department with the palliative care at Henry Mayo is 661-200-2867. And we see ourselves as a hospital service, but also a community service, because there are a lot of questions and there's a lot of resources and support out there. So people are welcome to call at any time.
On that note, let's go ahead and take a break. This is Families in Action on your local hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.